Sí.
Got it. Like to let me hear these people. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Larry, and I'm an alcoholic. And I am, thank you, Ali, for going out on the limb and letting me have another shot at this. It's pretty overwhelming here to talk about something I know so little about. I didn't. I'm so ashamed sometimes because it took me so long to find the thing I've been looking for after I got sober. And I didn't think that I was ever going to be able to have what you folks were talking about on a regular basis. And I guess I'm not sure if the format allows, but do I talk about how I got here or anything like that?
As the spirit moves you, brother.
What's that?
As the spirit moves you, whatever you like.
Okay. I want to talk to you about my nightmare I had last night. But I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. The thing that got me, let's get right down to it, is if you're new, I want to welcome you. And I know that sounds like I'm an old babbling fool, and I am, because this is, I've never really thought of myself as anything but a regular member of AA, and I hope I never get any higher than that. I'm just a coffee maker and a cookie lady. And, my home group don't care I'm on a Zoom in Canada. You know what I mean? They want their coffee made, But if it wasn't for that home group, I would have never found a power greater than myself, because I always equated it with something out there. I didn't know it was something that I would be able to see and believe and watch unfold right behold me. You know what I mean? And I chose that topic in here because it reminded me so much of when this disbelief started. I'm 5 years old, and my dad comes into my bedroom and he tells me that I'm going to have a baby brother. And at 5 years old, I start saving up my baseball cards and oiling up my glove and thinking about that kid brother and how we're going to go play baseball and go to the drag races and all that stuff. And 9 months later, my dad came into that same bedroom, and I had a bunch of cardboard boxes I had turned around because I made my own drum set out of these boxes. And the old man came in there and he told me that you're not going to have a baby brother. Your baby brother died. And he died at birth. And I got furious at the old man because he promised me. For 9 months, he was coming down there telling me that I was going to have this kid brother. And I couldn't wait because I was in the middle of two sisters. You know what I mean? And I wanted a little gang to beat them up, And when he came down there and told me that, I remember running after him with all 60 pounds, yelling and screaming, "You promised me, you promised me." And I blamed my father for something that he had no power over. And that was that little death at birth. And that was going to be my resentment that would separate me and my father until I met you. And what dawned on me that later on was this thing about God, because my mom had been always trying to, get me to go to church. And whenever they would go away, they would have me go to these YMCA summer camps held off by a church or something. They're always trying to get me to do stuff like that. The Boys or Cub Scouts. I remember she took me to the Cub Scouts, and I went to that first meeting, and there's all these little goofs in these blue uniforms, and they had built a little house out of ice cream sticks, and I set it on fire, and I knew right away I would not be a Cub Scout But anyway, they were always trying to get me to have some kind of belief, it seemed like. But what dawned on me in my little head and stuck with me is what type of God would create a baby and kill it? I'm next. And I wanted nothing to do with this thing called God, Jesus, Jehovah, Buddha, whatever that is. I knew that religion was something I didn't want nothing to do with. And from at the age of 5 till I met you guys and after, it was my stumbling block. I had to figure this thing out by myself, and I became a creature of the streets at an early age. Started drinking at 11 and, wound up coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And in 1975, they found me in downtown Los Angeles, Skid Row, over there on Alvaro Street. Across the street at a Chevron gas station on a pile of tires. And I wasn't over there vaping, you know what I mean? Every now and then when you're running the streets and doing what we do, you have to come out for a little rest. And I was over there resting on these pile of tires, and the police rolled up on me and they arrested me for violation of probation, public nuisance, and out-of-state forgeries, and sentenced me to 3.5 years in a penitentiary. And they sent me up to the LA County jail system in Wayside, and I was up there for about 2 months. And after about 2 months, they put about 50 of us in a black and white bus and sent us to the South Bay Courthouse in 1975. And I'm on the chain with about 40 other guys. And one by one, the judge is calling out these guys, and every one of them is being taken somewhere. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was the only guy left. I was on a concrete floor with a Vons bag and no hope, wondering where they're going to send me. And I heard some keys coming down the hall. The most beautiful music I heard in a long time was a set of those jailer keys coming down the hall. And there was a Scottish man with a patch standing there. And the Scottish man, "Aye, lad." He says, "Are you Larry Thomas?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He says, "Ah, that's great." He says, "My name is Alex." And he says, "Come with me, lad. We're going to AA." And I thought, AA? What's this AA? I've heard of OR and PO, but what's AA? And who's this Scottish pirate all of a sudden, And looking back, well over 40, 45 years, I know exactly what he is, because I see him sprinkled on this little meeting right now. And he's what my book would call a trusted servant. Now, what would make that man a trusted servant was simply this. He had no business being there. He wasn't a probation officer, and he wasn't a counselor, and he wasn't anybody, a doctor or anything like that. He was a refinery worker, and he got the worst news of his life that day. And that was his little wife was dying immediately of a terminal illness. And he knew she was in good hands, but he knew he wasn't. Somewhere in his meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, somewhere in Toronto, somewhere in a book study in Jersey, somewhere in a 12 and 12 in New York City, that man was to sit with you folks in that book and grasp and develop a manner of living that ingrained in him this, that practical experience of it, that nothing will ensure immunity from drinking, but intensive work with other alcoholics. This works. He didn't think of milk and whiskey. He didn't think about drinking. Something happened to him. Something happened to him just like our co-founder, Bill, laying in that hospital bed. And he's laying in that bed and he's shaking and he's sweating and he's screaming like we do when we come off our drunks. They are the most violent part of our life. And he's sitting there in that bed in his little high school bed. He just didn't just sit there and have this experience. He had a visitor. And his little buddy Ebby came by his bedside and started reading these proposals. And Bill tried his best to apply them to his life. And he had this profound experience. Now, it was one that I thought eluded me when I got sober. For 5 years, I ran around here thinking that I did something wrong because I didn't have a boomie like Bill's. And then in that same book study at 5 years sober, I'd be sitting next to you folks in a book study, and we would read that 2 paragraphs after Bill had that big kaboomie. He's still laying in that pea-stained bed, and the thought came to him that maybe I should work with other alcoholics. Now, how many of you had that your first day sober? You see, that's how rare it was. And then it dawned on me at 5 years sober that maybe, just maybe, that the thing happened to Bill suddenly, he's hoping and praying will happen to me gradually. But the end game is the same, baby. This thing isn't ours to keep. He's given it to us for one reason and one reason only. To tote this message to those new guys that are coming in. To tote that message. And Bill had this thing in this book. I love reading his story. Now, in the doctor's opinion, and if you're new, I welcome you, and I hope that you find something may get you to come back. And if you're a non-believer, I hope above hope that you stay with us until you. Here's the thing: if you're new, in Bill's story. Now, if you're new, don't get that book. Now, that's the only way you're going to get them to do stuff, and tell them not to do it. So don't get that book that's going to save your life, all right? Work it out amongst yourself, right? And in that doctor's opinion, Bill says that it read that the only answer we have is entire abstinence, right? And in that following paragraph, it says, this starts a seething cauldron of debate. You bet. You bet. Who would debate that? Every alkie I know. That's what they've been trying to do to me my entire life. Every counselor, every doctor, every place that ever tried to, their whole idea was to separate me from alcohol. They never told me what to do after I was separated. And this is what makes Alcoholics Anonymous so beautiful, is that we don't get you sober. Do that on the floor of your hotel. You do that curled up in your garage next to your cat box. You do it on your own. You do it. Alcoholics Anonymous, when you come and you're new and you just, now we have you. Now we have you. Now this is where Alcoholics Anonymous is going to work, you know? And in that story, in Bill's story, it says, my friend suggested, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Why don't you? Why don't you choose your own conception? Because I didn't have one. I didn't have one. And then it says in the following paragraph that it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than ourselves. Nothing more was required of me to make a beginning. Well, now he has me. Now he's starting to appeal to me through my defects of character, not through any knowledge, now he's getting at me where I live, at my defects of character. I am a slothful, lazy son of a gun. And when he's telling me, why don't you choose your own conception? I don't got to rely and do it anybody's way. Now he's putting it on me. And then he gives me the nugget that saved my life. He says, only being willing to believe in a power greater than yourself, nothing more was required. Well, I love the ring of that. Put me down for the minimum. You know what I mean? I'm all for doing nothing. And now he has my attention. You know what I mean? And this is, and over in Bill's story, he starts to read again. There I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood him, and I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction, which is what I did when I got to you. I went through my sponsor, you know what I mean? And I went to my first meeting in 1975. And I didn't get sober till 1982 because I didn't think I would have to do things. I thought my case was different. And I did what I'd always done my entire life. I sat in a room waiting for you to do something for me. I've had my hand out my entire life. What I was waiting to be done to me, God was waiting to do through me. There's a miracle here. And every time that I stopped drinking, I went to AA. And every time I stopped drinking, I got drunk because I didn't know what I had. In that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it says we have to rightly relate ourselves to our problem. You need to know what the problem is. I thought my problem was drinking. I thought my problem looked like this. You have alcoholism. You have a disease. You have a drinking problem. I was so far from the truth. I am in the grip of a progressive illness. It has me. I don't have it. It is not about me. I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink. I am going to drink because I lack the power not to. It has me. And what Alcoholics Anonymous and a power greater than myself, and every sentence in that book does for a guy like me is loosen up that grip just enough to be useful to you. I will never get so sober that I can't get drunk again. But I can get so drunk that I can't make it back. And I can't do this on my own. And on May 2nd, 1982, I was in the most familiar place I know, one more time on a street, coming out of a mission, singing for my beans. Then they kick you out early in the morning. And I'm out there on the street on May 2nd, 1982, not a penny in my pocket. And I can't get you out of my mind. There's nothing worse than coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and leaving. We may leave you, but you will never leave us. I couldn't get you out of my, I didn't think about you this much when I was around you. You know what I mean? And I couldn't get you out of my mind. I couldn't get this bald-headed carpenter out of my mind. This man in Alcoholics Anonymous that every time I called him, he would come and get me. And sure enough, man, I got kicked out of that mission. I started wandering the streets of Wilmington. I caught myself in a Woolworth window and I looked at myself and I said, oh my God, whatever happened to my dreams? Look at me. Look at me. I look like a rabid dog. And then it dawned on me I never had any dreams. And I panhandled some money and I called that man in Alcoholics Anonymous, that bald-headed carpenter, Don. And I said, Don, this is Larry. He was down at that Alano Club. I said, I'm ready to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Will you come and get me? And he told me the most profound thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, no. He says, you know where we are. You know what we got. Why don't you get your rusty rear down here yourself? I'm tired of chasing after you. And he hung up. And I thought, oh my God, you know, whatever happened to that AA love, you know? Well, I just heard it. For the first time in my life, it was up to me to come to you. And I was laying on that street because I was afraid I was going to drink. I knew I would. You see, I'd been that desperate before. I wished I was one of those guys that can tell you desperation is the thing that keeps me sober. I wished I could. But for a guy like me, desperation is like any other emotion that I have. After about 4 weeks, it wears off. And if I don't replace desperation with inspiration, I'm a dead man. And even inspiration can't keep a guy like me sober. Inspiration wears off if it's not fed its fuel. And I tell you what, if I don't have inspired to carry this message and perpetuate the gift, perpetuation is needed for a guy to keep his inspiration. And I needed to carry that message. And I called him and I kept thinking about it, and I had to talk to him. I had to ask this guy something. I used to call him up drunk and everything like that. I was a good drunken guy calling up all my friends and they, man, I'm sorry, man. I really love you, all that. And I called him up, and my panhandle, he said no. And I took the longest walk of my life, man, that 10 miles with my poopy pants and no hope, with one idea. I got to talk to that guy. And sitting on that curb and thinking about my life and that phone call, I came to believe. Now, I didn't come to believe in God or the big book or AA, but I came to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of my life with Larry running it. I surrendered. I knew I did the hardest thing that any alcoholic could ever do, and that is know that he was going to need help. I had that help. And I didn't want to do that. And I knew that I was going to drink unless I talked to that guy. And so I walked that 10 miles with my poopy pants and no hope with one idea. I got to talk to Don. Took me 2 weeks to get there. It was only 10 miles, right? And I finally got there and I showed up, 8 o'clock in the morning at this greasy, stinking, rotten, perverted Torrance Lameda Alano Club. And a couple by the name of Frank and Lucille grabbed me. And I was shaking and alone and afraid. And they didn't send me to a recovery home, and they didn't rush me off to some hospital or anything. They walked me around. They fed me honey and orange juice and buttermilk. I don't know who in the hell's idea that was, but it felt like I was making oatmeal in my stomach, and every time I would shake and fall on the floor, Lucille would lay me down and give me a little shot of some snops that they had over there and some candy bars and walk me around because I had to see Don. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Don rolled up and I had to ask this man the question. That I don't know what to do with my life. I said, would you be my sponsor? And he looked at me and he lit up like a chandelier for about 10 seconds. And then he lit into me for about 20 minutes. And under no certain terms is he going to put up with my nonsense. And he says, I'll sponsor you under one condition, you little rat. He says, you make the effort, I'll make the effort. If you don't make the effort, lose my number, kid. I've got guys that want to stay sober, Larry. I got guys that are telling me not to sponsor you. You're not a likable man around here, And I fell in love with a guy. And I stayed with him that day. And that Thursday night meeting, he stood me up, grabbed me underneath that armpit. You know how they are, Calvin. Grab me underneath that, The damn carpenters, man. I'd never seen somebody lift up a plumber so quick besides somebody that had a check bounce, you know what I mean? And they lifted me up, man. And for the first time in my life, I said, my name is Larry Thomas. I'm an alcoholic. And I believed it. I believed it. I knew that this thing had me. I didn't have it. And after the meeting, I thought the guy was going to take me back to the mission, right? And Don sticks me. He says, you're coming home with me. And I said, what? He says, yeah, you're coming home with me. He says, you're going to spend the night at my house. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. Man, I started smelling pancakes and waffles already, and sausage frying and stuff. This is great, man. I'm staying at this guy's house, man. This is great, man, coming back to AA. Well, we got up to his house, and he was a carpenter. And in front of his apartment, he had an abandoned camper. Not a big camper where you sleep 5 people, one that fits one guy in a toolbox. It's one of these camper shells. And it wasn't even on a truck. It was on bricks. And he opened up the camper and he says, get in there. That's where you're staying. And I said, Jesus, take me back to the mission for God's sakes. You know what I mean? No, you're staying here tonight. And if you think about running out, he says, think twice because I'll call the cops on you. And he slammed the door. And I said, what kind of deal is this? You know what I mean? And then he comes running back and he opens up that door and he says, oh, he says, and you better find a God, hotshot. And he slammed the door again. And I said, my God, this guy's crazy, man. Where am I going to find a God? I'm in a camper shell, for God's sake, you know? Is he in the glove box or something, you know? And I tell you, about 3:00 in the morning, I'm sitting there looking out the little window that he has there, you know, and watching the trees breathe and everything, you know. And the thought came to me that I'm never going to let anybody run me out of me. I'm never leaving this place. I don't care what they do, what they say. I am never leaving this thing. I'm going to find out everything I can about this thing, Alcoholics Anonymous, because I am so tired of being new. I don't ever want to be new again. I don't want to be new in jail. I don't want to be new in the block. I don't want to be new. I am so tired of being new. I'm going to stay here till they have to burn me like it's old weed or something. But I'm never going to let anything run me out. I didn't know that I was making a surrender at that time. I didn't mention the G word. I had no idea that I was surrendering and that I was taking my third step right there, that I was opening up myself, willing to do anything to relieve this merciless obsession. Bill writes about that in the 12 and 12. I stood ready to do anything to relieve this merciless obsession. I can't think of a better way to describe our malady than merciless. It doesn't care how you feel, what your mood is, who is going to be, you know, affected by it. It is designed to do one thing, to get you to the poison. And I stood ready to do anything. And I fell in love with that guy. And in step 11, he talks about, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only knowledge for his will for us and the power to carry that out. I didn't know God was truth. I didn't know that truth would be the thing that set me free. I thought truth is the thing that's going to get you. That's the thing they're going to hang you with. And it says that perhaps we don't believe in these things at all. And we well remember how something deep inside us kept rebelling against the idea of bowing before any God. I ain't bowing before nothing. Deep inside, what was that rebelling? That 5-year-old kid. That 5-year-old kid was down there, and he was still with me calling the shots. He was still down there running the idea that I would be bowing. I didn't know that getting on my knees and praying would be the most beautiful thing I'd ever done in my life. Sought through prayer and meditation. Sought through prayer and meditation. In that third step, Bill talks about this. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, everybody was telling me, don't rush the God idea. Don't do anything about it. It'll happen. Don't worry about it. Just get on with your stuff. Oh, don't worry about it. On page 62, Bill calls us on it. He says, whatever it is, whether he be the director, whether he be the employer, whether he be the all-power, whatever you want to call it, when we sincerely take this position, now he's calling me on it. Okay, champ, you've had long enough to mull it over. What is it? He says, when we sincerely take this position, remarkable things will begin to happen. And baby, I was ready for some remarkable things. Now, I'm sorry to say that it took me a little over 20 years to get to that point of being sincere. Because I didn't know that he wasn't out there. And I started coming to believe in these little commitments that I had in my home group. I started believing the people. I started believing in something. See, I'm a stickler for evidence. You got to show me. And little did I know that every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, these people that I was making coffee for, cleaning up for, I had no idea that I was looking at the evidence, that I was playing in the evidence of a power greater than myself, that this very spirit that they want me to keep unified in Alcoholics Anonymous, my home group, was talking to me. And it seemed to me that at 5 years sober, what started happening to me, that the more I served you, the clearer he became. You understand what I'm saying now? You understand? The more I served you, the clearer he became. He ain't going to come to me if I don't do nothing. He's waiting for me to pick up a shovel. What are you doing for it? I'm here. How useful are you going to be? And the more useful I became, the clearer he became. And before you know it, at a little over 20 years sober, this non-believer, I started finding something in them. I started believing that maybe I got a chance, that maybe the kingdom ain't out there. That maybe heaven and the king, everything's right here. That maybe they were right at that goofy club, that it's an inside job. Maybe it's an inside job. And maybe in that prayer where they start talking about, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. That where there is hatred, I bring love. That where there is wrong, I bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I bring harmony. That where there is error, I bring truth. That where there is doubt, I bring faith. That where there is despair, I bring hope. And where there are shadows, I bring light. And when there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. And it's by dying that one is awakened to eternal life. Amen. Isn't that amazing? Lord, make me a channel. By golly, when we work with newcomers, what's the thing we throw out there is that channel. Now, what's in your channel? What do you got in there for that new guy? See, I didn't drink myself into AA. I identified myself into AA through your stories, which you were telling me, your experience, strength, and hope. And that's what's in our channel. That's what we connect with. Not a bunch of fancy words and big cars. And we connect with our experience, strength, and hope. Because that new man, that may be the only rope he can grab onto so he can pull himself into AA by your story. And you do the magic thing, man. You keep that man or woman from feeling so damn different that they don't belong here either. And when they hear Teresa's story and Joyce's story and Susan's and Calvin's and Drew's and all these, maybe, man, these crazy bastards got the idea, you know? I'm with them all the way. They may be goofy and dress funny, but they got me, man. You know what I mean? All these nicknames we give ourselves, you know what I mean? And you had me. You had me where I live. Now, what makes prayer and meditation so hard? What makes prayer and meditation so hard? Want to know what made it hard for me? It's because it was too easy to do. Because I can do it anywhere at any time. That I don't need to do it in the morning. Maybe I don't need to do it when I'm in trouble. I can do it any damn time, and before you know it, it's out of reach. So what I needed to do is what my sponsor recommended me to do, and some folks that I was with, that I start the morning on my knees, whether I believe or not. And I started taking actions that I didn't believe. I was divinely inconvenienced. And if you're new, if you're coming here to get something, you're going to be discouraged because there's nothing to get in AA. Look around you, for God's sake. There's nothing to get here, man. You know what I mean? You got people in Sacramento Zooming Canada, for God's sake. You know what I mean? There's nothing to get here. But what you're going to do is you're going to be divinely inconvenienced for the rest of your darn life. And it's going to be those inconveniences that'll save your life. And I found myself having a routine. And when all else failed, whether it be good days or bad days or tragedies, I stick to my routine. I wake up every morning and I give myself away to my Father God. One of the things on my inventory that I always wanted to be was somebody's son. Oh, I wanted to be my father's. My sponsor, Johnny, told me on my 20th birthday, he says, I didn't have any sons, but if I had one, you'd be it, Larry. He says there's nothing you can do to make me love you anymore. And he says, I don't think there's anything you can do to make me love you any less. I just love you. But what I need you to do, son, I need you to tell people what happened to you and what you're like and how you did it. That's all I need you to do, son. And I fell in love with him. And I feel like I'm his son. And I found out not so much what God is, but what I am to him. What is my position? Today, I feel like I'm his son. I believe that I feel like I'm my God's son. I feel like I'm my father's son. I feel like I'm my sponsor's son. And I feel like I'm Alcoholics Anonymous' son. And I'm ready to be useful. I want them to use me right up. And I go to bed and I say my prayers, and they're not just certain things I do every night. And this prayer becomes a privilege and not an obligation. Because in that privilege of praying, you will find your best friend being a power greater than yourself, who's ready to help you at any time. Now, I know I've been long-winded, but I got to tell you a little story. I used to make fun of my precious wife, Rosie, when we were newly married, because she had a God box. And I was smart and sassy and 17 years sober and hip, slick, and cool. And she had a God box. And she used to put her little troubles in there. And she'd put it in her God box. And I would sneak in there and put my receipt in there and stuff like that and mess around with it and little comic strips and stuff, you know, and kind of poke fun of her. 8 years ago, I'm on a landing strip in Chicago, and the plane's being delayed. And I'm restless, irritable, and discontented. And I can't stand the way I feel, and I don't want to fly or none of that stuff. And I started thinking about, all right, God, let's play a little game. You ready to play? I says, I've got a couple things on my mind that are tangling me up, and I'm wondering if you can help me with them. And I wrote them down in a little back page of my 12 and 12, what they were, and the date. And lo and behold, when I got home from that flight, I cracked open my 12 and 12, and I'll be damned if those things weren't handled. And I began to do that, and he began to handle them. Maybe not in my time frame, but I began to see that he does work for me, that he is ready to help me, and that if I just talk to him like I talk to you, and let him know Pop, this thing's got me tangled up and I don't know what to do. It's keeping me from being useful. Can you give me a hand with this and leave it alone? Isn't it amazing how some of those things are untangled? But he constantly tells us to stop praying for ourselves. We ask for help and we go about our business. He constantly reminds us not to pray for ourselves and our selfish ends all, you know. And I tell you, I badger that guy all day long now because no longer do I feel alone. No longer am I alone in this thing called life. And my greatest blessing being with you folks, whether I be in a computer or rubbing you shoulder to shoulder. I believe the people in that spirit of Alcoholics Anonymous are my greatest blessings. And I hope I never get spoiled by my greatest blessings. Thank you for letting me ramble. I love you all.